Good evening.
My name is Brad, and the reason I am sending this email to Horror Stories is because I want to share something very, very disturbing that happened to me less than a year ago. It was in 2023, during my shift as a truck driver on a Saturday. This experience has caused me so much trauma that I resigned after that day. I had been with the company for many years, but even so, what happened that night has surpassed me. I have been through many things. As being a truck driver involves being out on the road and very exposed, I have been attempted to be robbed. My truck got stuck on a road in a storm. I have had flat tires halfway through. Well, part of the job, I suppose. But what happened next exceeded my limits. It was terrifying and sinister, and I don't think I'll ever find an explanation. I consider this story paranormal, as do my friends and family who already know about it. I remember that trip as if it were yesterday. We left the base with my colleague Kevin because it was a long way, and we could advance faster that way. The base was located in Nashville, and this time our destination was Austin. A journey that would take more than 22 hours to arrive, depending on the stops we made and, of course, whether the weather was in our favor or not. The important thing was to deliver the cargo on Monday morning. We finally arrived in Austin. The outbound trip was very enjoyable, as my colleague and I took turns driving. One slept while the other drove, and vice versa. Occasionally we chatted to pass the time and stopped a couple of times to have a coffee. The truth is, we had already shared some trips and knew each other very well. On the way back, everything changed. I had been driving for about 4 hours on the road. The sun had already set. When my colleague asked me how much longer it would be until the next stop we usually made, I checked the GPS and there were a little over 100 kilometers left. He asked me to stop as soon as possible, as he felt sick to his stomach and needed to take a break. I asked him if he was okay, to which he replied that he thought he had eaten something that didn't sit well with him, so I focused on finding a safe place to pull over. We were driving on a very dark road between the mountains, but I knew it would only be for a moment, so I wasn't too worried. The important thing was to make sure he felt okay, as he would have to drive in a couple of hours. Finally, I turned on the hazard lights and pulled the truck over to the side of the road. I asked Kevin to get out, but I warned him not to take too long, as we couldn't stay there for long. After stopping the truck and asking Kevin to get out, I was left alone on the dark road as he moved to the side to attend to his needs. While waiting inside the truck, I felt a shiver run down my spine, as if I were being observed by something more than just the darkness of the night. The wind blew strongly, making the truck's body creak and creating an even more unsettling atmosphere. Minutes passed slowly, and I started to become impatient. What was taking Kevin so long? I started calling out to him to make sure he was okay, but I got no response. I decided to get out of the truck and look for him, but when I opened the door, I was met with a perplexing sign. The area around me was shrouded in a dense, oppressive darkness, and there was no sign of Kevin anywhere. Only the eerie silence surrounded me. My instincts told me that something was terribly wrong. I started calling his name louder, hoping for a response, but the echo of my own voice was the only answer I got. With my heart pounding, I took a flashlight out of my pocket and turned it on. Its beam of light cut through the darkness, gradually revealing the chilling reality that surrounded me. On the ground, right next to the truck, I found some drag marks leading towards the edge of the forest that bordered the road. My mind filled with fear and paranoia as I followed the tracks with the flashlight in hand. What had happened to Kevin? What was that sinister trail he had left behind? Every step I took brought me closer to a truth I would rather not uncover. But my curiosity and concern compelled me to continue. Finally, I saw him slowly approaching the truck with a pale face. I asked if he was okay, and he only responded affirmatively, indicating that we should continue. During the journey, I expressed my concern, thinking that perhaps he was paranoid, but I was reassured by the fact that it was just a scare. He barely responded, staring fixedly at the road, which seemed very strange to me. After a few minutes, I suggested that he lie down and rest, as he would have to take over driving in a couple of hours, but he adamantly refused to move from the passenger seat, insisting that he was fine. My mind couldn't stop speculating about what was happening to him. Since he didn't utter a sound, his mere presence made me uncomfortable. I suggested that at the next rest stop, before changing roles, we stop for a coffee as he hadn't slept, and that worried me. Although I was wide awake, albeit a bit exhausted, I knew I had to hand over control during his shift, as the rules dictated. Almost reaching the service station, my cell phone began to ring. Although I had no intention of answering it while driving, I saw that it was a call from Kevin. This puzzled me, as he was sitting next to me in the passenger seat, hardly moving. At that moment, panic overtook me. For a moment, I thought it might be a prank, but he didn't react. I accelerated the truck abruptly and took the exit to stop at the service station. I quickly got off the truck, hoping that Kevin would do the same, but to my surprise, he didn't. I asked if he wanted anything else from the coffee, and he replied that he was fine. Upon entering the station, my phone rang again, and upon answering, I discovered it was Kevin. I answered quickly, thinking maybe he had changed his mind and wanted to ask me to buy him something. But he was shouting, accusing me of leaving him stranded in the mountains when he asked me to stop to relieve himself. This puzzled me even more to hear this, as I was certain we were together at the service station, having coffee. I looked outside from the station to search for him, but he wasn't there. That's when Kevin abruptly ended the call. I called him again to explain what was happening, but all I could hear were his accusatory screams accusing me of abandoning him. A chill ran down my spine as I tried to explain to him that couldn't be true, as we were together at the service station. Kevin insisted that if it hadn't been for the man who happened to pass by and rescue him, he could have been dead, and he threatened to report this incident to his supervisor. However, despite my pleas for him to listen to me and let me say something else, Kevin cynically laughed and hung up the phone. I ran out of the service station, but there was no one there. I circled around several times before leaving, trying to understand how what Kevin was telling me could be possible. Who had been with me during that whole journey? I was in a state of shock. I had to take a few minutes to calm down and continue driving alone, as I now had to take over Kevin's shift myself. Although at that moment, honestly, that was the least of my worries. I tried to stay calm as I continued driving along the dark road. However, fear and paranoia consumed me with every kilometer I covered. What dark force or sinister entity had taken Kevin's place in the truck? As my mind wandered in search of answers, a sense of discomfort and oppression enveloped me. The silence of the night grew increasingly unsettling, and the feeling of being watched intensified with every curve of the road. As I distanced myself from the darkness of the night, my mind could only focus on reaching the base and explaining the whole situation, as well as meeting with Kevin. Upon arrival, I was surprised to find the base deserted. Everyone had gone out on the road. Without hesitation, I began my journey back home, hoping that at least my wife would believe me. When I arrived and began recounting the terrifying night to her, she was shocked and horrified by what had happened to me. I saw horror on her face, but at the same time, relief at seeing me safe and sound. However, neither of us could find an explanation for what had happened that night. The image of Kevin lingered in my mind. That's why I called him that same afternoon and learned that in addition to the fright of the night, he inexplicably suffered a blow to the head and had passed out. A man rescued him, but he didn't remember much more. Although Kevin wants to believe me, he seems unable to accept my account of events. The disappointment and pain this causes me are overwhelming. Losing a friend in this way, combined with the trauma of that night, has been too much for me. Deciding to quit my job that same afternoon was an impulsive act, but I couldn't bear the thought of facing that darkness, that unresolved mystery again. This experience, this inexplicable event, will continue to haunt me forever. It will remind me that there are forces in the world that are beyond our comprehension, lurking in the shadows, waiting for their opportunity to ensnare us. Although I reflect on it time and time again, I know that I will never find a logical or rational explanation for what happened that night on the road. It's a disturbing reminder of how fragile our understanding of the world we inhabit is, and of the dangers that lurk in the darkest corners of existence. In the present day, I have sold my truck and opened a specialized workshop for commercial vehicles. I am no longer behind the wheel, but I continue to work in the same industry, so to speak. And I hope not, but it is very likely that I will hear a similar story to this one over the years. If you enjoyed this story, subscribe to Horror Stories and hit the bell so you don't miss any others. Until next time.